Vanessa's palm struck Elena's cheek, and the crystal glasses stopped singing. The sound was small, almost elegant, yet it cut through the coal dining room more cleanly than shattered glass. Beneath the amber chandelier, 12 faces turned toward Elena. Beeswax candles scented the warm air. Silverware lay motionless against white porcelain. A red mark slowly surfaced on her skin. Vanessa remained beside the mahogany table, one hand trembling above her champagne flute, the diamond at her throat flashing with every sharp breath. "Don't stand there pretending you're offended," she said. "We all know why you came." Elena touched her cheek with 2 fingers. Her expression did not change. The invitation was still inside her plain black purse, the one Vanessa had examined with a curled lip when Elena arrived. Family gathering, it had said in Adrian's restrained handwriting. No conditions, no request for money, no warning that she would be seated beneath the portrait from which the Coles had removed her after the divorce. Vanessa. Adrian's chair scraped across the hardwood. He moved around the table, but the moment had already sealed itself into every witness. His sister's raised hand, his former wife standing alone, and his own place at the far end of the room. Too late by one breath. Sometimes that was all silence required. Vanessa pointed at Elena's charcoal dress. Its cuffs softened from washing. She disappears for 2 years, then walks back in when Cole Group is hosting bankers. What would you call that? Her gaze swept the table, collecting approval. She wants another check. Someone near the fireplace released an uncomfortable laugh. Another relative studied his plate. The grandfather clock clicked behind Elena, each brass movement unnaturally loud. Adrian stopped several feet away. His jaw tightened, but Elena lifted one hand, not for protection, only to keep him where he was. She had not come to be rescued by the man who had invited her into this room. "I didn't ask anyone here for money," she said. Her voice was quiet enough that the family had to lean toward it. Vanessa gave a brittle smile. "Women like you never ask directly." She reached for Elena's purse. Elena moved it beyond her grasp with a single measured motion. The gesture was neither hurried nor defensive. It drew a boundary across the polished table. "You wore thrift store coats while Adrian paid for everything," Vanessa continued. "You embarrassed this family, then took our name through divorce court. And now you appear looking like a waitress because you think poverty makes you innocent." The candle nearest Elena released a thread of smoke. She watched it twist toward the chandelier while heat lingered beneath her cheek. Around her, the room smelled of roast beef, old cedar, and expensive perfume, the carefully preserved fragrance of people who mistook possession for character. Adrian finally stepped between them. Enough. The word landed hard, but it could not travel backward. Elena looked past his shoulder at Vanessa, then at each silent relative who had witnessed the accusation and waited to see whether she would fracture beneath it. Her fingers closed around the stem of her water glass. For one suspended second, Vanessa seemed to expect the contents across her dress. Elena merely set it down. Crystal met wood with a soft, deliberate click. "Is this how the Cole family treats every guest?" No one answered. The clock continued counting. Adrian turned toward his sister as if seeing the distance between them for the first time. Vanessa's face stiffened, not with remorse, but with irritation that Elena had refused a role prepared for her. "You should apologize for coming here under false pretenses," she said. Elena's gaze shifted to the narrow gold band on her right hand, the last object connecting her to a family that had already judged what she was worth. Then she looked at Adrian. He had finally spoken, but the question in his eyes arrived later than his defense. How many times had this happened while he called his silence peace? Elena lowered her hand from her burning cheek. The room had expected tears, rage, perhaps a plea. Instead, she pulled out the empty chair beside her and sat down with perfect composure. "Then tell me, Vanessa," she said, smoothing the linen napkin across her lap, "what exactly do you believe I came to take?" Vanessa opened her mouth, and Adrian's face changed before she could answer. Whatever accusation came next would no longer expose Elena. It would expose the family that had invited her back. The grandfather clock struck 9, each bronze note pressing against the silence around the table. Candlelight slid across the narrow gold band on Elena's finger, and beneath the smell of roast beef and beeswax came the faint citrus sting of the soap she once used in the Cole kitchen. The scent opened a door she had spent 2 years keeping shut. On her first Thanksgiving as Adrian's wife, she had stood at that same marble sink with her sleeves rolled above her elbows, washing 12 dinner plates while Vanessa entertained guests 20 feet away. Hot water had reddened Elena's hands. Laughter drifted through the doorway with the scent of cinnamon and coffee. Adrian could have married anyone, Vanessa had remarked, loud enough to carry. Instead, he chose someone who came with one suitcase and no prospects. Elena had waited for his answer. Through the reflection in the dark window, she saw Adrian lower his coffee cup. His knuckles whitened around the porcelain. "Let's not ruin Thanksgiving," he finally said. "Not stop. Not apologize. Let's not ruin Thanksgiving." Elena had turned back to the sink and removed the plain, silver watch hidden beneath her cuff, protecting it from the water. It was worth more than everything Vanessa wore that evening, though no one in the house knew it. That was how Elena had wanted it. Before Adrian, expensive restaurants had meant men studying her last name before studying her face. Flowers arrived with business proposals tucked beneath the ribbon. Compliments sharpened into questions about ownership, access, and introductions. So when she met Adrian at a neighborhood bookstore, Elena gave him only what could not be appraised. Her first name, a modest apartment, thrift store coats, and shifts at a small cafe. She wanted to know whether a home could be built without money becoming its foundation. Adrian had loved the life she showed him. He brought soup when she worked late, repaired the loose cabinet beneath her sink, and read beside her while the radiator clicked through winter nights. Yet inside the Cole mansion, his tenderness became caution. Each insult was postponed until later, softened behind closed doors, buried beneath the phrase, "They'll come around." They never did. At Christmas, Vanessa gave Elena a grocery store gift card in a velvet jewelry box. At an anniversary dinner, the family accountant asked whether Elena understood prenuptial agreements. Adrian always found her afterward. In the quiet of their car, leather cold beneath their hands, he would apologize and squeeze her fingers. Then he would drive them back the following weekend. The final fracture came in their kitchen 2 years ago. Rain tapped the windows. An untouched casserole cooled on the stove, filling the room with rosemary and scorched cheese. Vanessa had accused Elena of marrying Adrian for security, and Adrian had asked his sister to leave, but only after Elena demanded it. When the door shut, he rubbed both hands over his face. "Why can't you ignore her?" Elena had looked at the wedding photograph beside the fruit bowl. In it, Adrian's hand rested securely at her waist. In their home, that same hand hung uselessly at his side whenever his family entered. "Because every time you ask me to ignore it," she said, "you're asking me to disappear so they can stay comfortable." The next morning, she placed signed divorce papers on the table. No demand for support. No claim against Cole property. She left with the same single suitcase she had brought into the marriage, surrendering not money, but the hope that his private love would ever become public courage. Back in the dining room, the last chime faded. Adrian stared at Elena's gold band, and the memory seemed to settle between them with the weight of another place setting. He turned from her to Vanessa. "She took nothing in the divorce," he said. His voice was low, but this time it crossed the entire room. "Not the house. Not my accounts. Not $1. Vanessa's smile tightened. "Then why is she wearing mother's ring?" Elena's thumb rested against the warm metal. Adrian pulled his chair away from the table and remained standing, making his first choice before the family could make it for him. "Because I asked her to keep it." Vanessa shoved back her chair, its legs shrieking across the hardwood. "Then she can apologize for tonight, or give it back and leave." Elena looked down at the ring the Coles had once called proof that she belonged. Slowly, she curled her fingers around it. "Apologize," Vanessa repeated, flattening both palms against the mahogany table. Candle flames trembled inside their glass holders, and the air conditioning breathed cold across the fading heat on Elena's cheek. Around them, dinner congealed on untouched plates. Adrian stepped fully between the two women, blocking his sister's reach. "You struck an invited guest in our family home," he said. Elena owes you nothing. A serving spoon slipped from someone's fingers and rang against china. Vanessa stared at him, her mouth tightening around a response that did not come quickly enough. For years, Adrian had delivered his objections in private rooms, after closed doors, when no witness could measure their cost. This one remained in the light. You're defending her against your own family? Vanessa asked. I'm refusing to defend what you did. Adrian took the folded dinner napkin from beside his plate, dampened one corner with ice water, and held it toward Elena. She did not take it. Her fingers remained wrapped around the gold ring. The metal had warmed against her skin, molded by years of wear, into something familiar enough to resemble belonging. Vanessa lifted her chin. She came here after abandoning this family. She provoked me, insulted everyone at this table, and turned dinner into a spectacle. If she wants to leave with any dignity, she can apologize first. Elena rose. The linen napkin slid from her lap and settled soundlessly on the rug. Adrian turned toward her, still holding the damp cloth, but she moved past his extended hand. Not away from Vanessa. Toward her. The distance between them narrowed to the width of one chair. Vanilla perfume clung to Vanessa's dress. The cold edge of the table pressed against Elena's fingertips. You believe my dignity belongs to whoever owns this ring, Elena said. Vanessa's eyes dropped to the gold band. That ring belongs to the Cole family. No, Adrian said. It belongs to Elena. Mother gave it to her. Mother gave it to your wife. She isn't your wife anymore. Adrian placed the cloth on the table. Then I'll leave with her. The words changed the room. A relative near the fireplace inhaled sharply. Vanessa's hand closed around the back of her chair, while Adrian reached for his jacket as though he had finally found an action large enough to answer years of silence. Elena watched him lift it from the carved wooden rail. Once, that gesture would have been everything she wanted. Tonight, it arrived carrying the weight of all the times it had not. No, Adrian. His hand stopped inside one sleeve. You don't have to walk out alone. I know. Elena raised her right hand and pressed her thumb beneath the band. For an instant, it resisted at the knuckle. Then it slipped free, leaving a pale circle on her skin. The chandelier caught its worn engraving as she placed it beside Vanessa's champagne flute. Gold touched mahogany with a thin, clean note. Vanessa looked down as if she had one, but Elena pushed the ring across the table until it stopped directly beneath her hand. You asked for an apology or the ring, Elena said. You can have the only thing here that was ever yours to demand. Adrian removed his arm from the jacket. Elena, don't give it back because of her. I'm not. Her eyes met his. I'm giving it back because I no longer need this family's permission to know what I'm worth. No one reached for the ring. Without it, Elena's hand looked lighter. She picked up her black purse and walked toward the foyer, her heels quiet on the thick rug, then crisp against the marble. Adrian followed as far as the dining room threshold. She turned before he could cross it. Stay. One word. Not a request for rescue. Not another private apology. A boundary. If you want to change what happens in this house, do it when I'm not here to be your reason. She opened the front door. Cool night air carried the scent of wet boxwood into the warm foyer. Behind her, Vanessa called the ring a final settlement, but Elena did not look back. The heavy door closed with a muted click. At the curb, a plain gray sedan waited beneath the amber street lamp. Elena slid into the rear seat rather than the driver's side. The man behind the wheel straightened immediately. Ms. Vale, he said, your secure line has been waiting. Elena opened her purse as the Cole mansion receded behind tinted glass. Inside, beneath the inexpensive invitation, a second phone glowed with 12 missed calls. 12 vibrations pulsed against the leather seat, one after another, while streetlights swept across the sedan's tinted windows. The cabin smelled of rain and clean upholstery. The secure phone cast a cold blue rectangle over Elena's bare ring finger. She answered the newest call. Put the Asia team on hold for 6 minutes, she said. Move New York into Conference 1, and send me the revised exposure report. The driver glanced at her through the mirror, waiting. Vale Meridian. Headquarters. The gray sedan turned away from Elena's modest apartment and carried her downtown. 20 minutes later, it descended into a private garage beneath a black glass tower. A security gate lifted before the car reached it. The elevator recognized Elena's fingerprint, then climbed 43 floors without stopping. When the doors opened, assistants in dark suits rose behind a curved reception desk. No one looked at her charcoal dress or the purse Vanessa had dismissed. Their attention went to the woman wearing them. "Good evening, Ms. Vale." Frosted glass parted. Beyond it, Manhattan burned in gold and white beneath floor-to-ceiling windows, while market data moved across 3 silent screens. The name Vale Meridian was etched into a wall of pale stone. Elena entered the boardroom, set her inexpensive purse beside a polished walnut chair, and tied back her hair. 12 faces waited on the secure video wall from New York, London, and Singapore. "Begin," she said. Numbers replaced faces. The fund's positions crossed energy, logistics, housing, and medical technology. Billions moved beneath her fingertips in clean columns of white light. A director began explaining why a failing manufacturer should be stripped and sold. Elena stopped him with one raised finger. "Keep the plants open. Restructure the debt. Remove the executives who falsified the forecasts, and protect payroll. That reduces our first-year return. It preserves 600 jobs." She signed the authorization. The room shifted immediately. Attorneys receiving instructions, analysts reopening models, capital moving because Elena had chosen where it would go. No one at the Cole table had known that the woman they called dependent had built Vale Meridian from a 2-room office into a multi-billion-dollar investment fund. They had seen an apron and never asked what happened after she untied it. Years earlier, before sunrise, Elena had served coffee beneath warm pendant lamps at a neighborhood cafe. Steam dampened her wrists. Roasted beans and orange cleaner clung to her clothes. She worked the counter because ordinary conversation gave her something wealth had stolen. People spoke freely when they believed she had nothing to offer but coffee. At closing, she wiped the chalkboard, counted tips, and walked 3 blocks to a rented office where fluorescent tubes hummed above secondhand desks. There, she became the founder no photograph identified. She reviewed acquisitions until midnight, negotiated through voice-only calls, and signed through a holding structure that kept her face out of financial pages. The apron had never been a costume designed to test Adrian. It was shelter. Before him, dates had memorized her portfolio, strangers had manufactured affection, and friends had sold private details to business reporters. Modesty let her hear words untouched by appetite. Adrian had been the first man to repair her leaking sink without asking what the building was worth. That was why his later silence had cut deeper than Vanessa's contempt. Near midnight, the video wall went dark. Elena stood alone before the windows, city light sharpening her reflection. The family gathering already felt distant, except for the pale circle where the ring had rested. Her chief operating officer entered carrying a sealed portfolio. "One item requires your personal authorization." Elena opened it. On top lay a routine risk memorandum listing companies whose debt could destabilize Vale Meridian's next quarter. Her gaze stopped on a familiar name halfway down the page. Cole Group. She did not ask how serious it was. That question belonged to analysts. Instead, she closed the folder and pushed it back across the walnut. "No preferential treatment," she said. "Have the credit team complete its review before the market opens." By dawn, Adrian's family would learn whether the woman they had treated as poor would become the most powerful decision-maker in their future. Cold morning light lay across the Cole Group boardroom, bleaching the faces gathered around its 20-foot table. An air vent rattled above the windows, and burnt coffee sharpened the smell of leather folders and printer toner. Adrian stood at the head of the table with a rescue agreement opened beneath his hands. The final page required his signature by noon. Without it, the company's lenders would freeze its credit lines, leaving payroll uncovered and bankruptcy filing as the next legal step. Only one investor remained willing to provide emergency capital, an unnamed fund represented through outside counsel. Adrian turned back to the financial schedules. 8 months of unpaid obligations sat in columns that had never appeared in the reports sent to him. Loan covenants had been breached, vendor invoices delayed, and pension contributions quietly diverted to cover operating losses. The missing disclosures bore approvals from other members of the Cole leadership, while his own copies had been altered before reaching his desk. Across from him, Vanessa tapped one lacquered nail against the contract. A faint bruise of sleeplessness darkened the skin beneath her eyes, though her cream suit remained immaculate. "Sign it," she said. "We announced the rescue this afternoon and settle the rest internally." Adrian turned to the indemnification clause marked with a yellow tab. It blamed the collapse on reputational damage caused by an unnamed former spouse who had allegedly sought access to confidential company information. Attached was a prepared statement identifying Elena as the source of damaging rumors. Her attendance at the family gathering had been rewritten as an attempted financial solicitation. Vanessa's slap had disappeared entirely. "You built a defense around Elena," Adrian said. Paper whispered beneath his fingertips. "A woman with no position here, no access to these books, and no claim against the company. She returned the same week our lenders tightened terms," Vanessa replied. "People will believe motive when they see one." You invited her. I'm making that useful." Adrian's gaze moved to the signature block. The agreement offered him exactly what he had spent years preserving. The company, the family name, his office above Madison Avenue. All it required was the same bargain he had made throughout his marriage. Elena absorbing the cost so the Coles could remain comfortable. He lifted the contract. For a moment, Vanessa leaned forward, mistaking movement for surrender. Adrian tore the signature page once, then again. The dry rip traveled through the boardroom. He dropped the 4 pieces onto the table. "Send the investor accurate books," he said. "Remove Elena's name from every document and statement." A senior director closed his eyes. Vanessa rose so quickly that her chair struck the credenza behind her. "Do you understand what you just did?" "Yes." Adrian slid the altered reports toward the center of the table. "I refuse to save this company with a lie about someone we already wronged." Vanessa pressed a button beside her folder. The boardroom doors opened, admitting 2 corporate attorneys and the head of security. Their shoes clicked over the stone floor. Chilled air entered from the hallway. One attorney placed a sealed resolution beside Adrian's ruined contract. "The board anticipated a refusal," he said. The resolution removed Adrian as chief executive, terminated his authority over company accounts, and barred him from the executive floors pending an internal review. The vote had already been taken before he arrived. Vanessa collected his access card from the table and held out her palm for his office keys. "You chose your ex-wife over 9,000 employees." Adrian unclipped the keys from his belt and set them beside the gold family ring Vanessa had brought from the mansion, perhaps as a reminder of what obedience protected. Metal struck wood. "No," he said. "You chose Elena as a shield. I chose not to help you." Security escorted him through the executive corridor. Employees paused beneath the white office lights as his badge failed against the elevator reader. He removed it and handed it over without protest. By the time the elevator reached the lobby, his company email, title, and voting access had vanished. Outside, delivery trucks groaned through morning traffic, and cold wind drove newspaper scraps along the sidewalk. His phone rang before he reached the curb. The caller identified himself as counsel for the anonymous investor. "Mr. Cole, the revised rescue agreement expires tomorrow at 6 p.m., the lawyer said. "Your removal does not stop the review. It only leaves your family without anyone authorized to correct the record." Adrian looked up at the tower where Vanessa now controlled the boardroom. Somewhere beyond its glass, she still believed the unknown investor could be persuaded to accept her version of Elena. "Then send the investor everything," Adrian said, "including the pages my family tried to hide." The line went quiet for half a beat. "Once submitted, that disclosure cannot be withdrawn." Adrian watched his former office lights switch off 40 floors above him. "Submitted." A cream envelope slid across the walnut table and stopped beside Elena's untouched espresso. Beyond the windows, Afternoon sun flashed against Manhattan glass. Inside Vale Meridian's conference room, the ventilation whispered over the dry scent of paper and dark-roasted coffee. Elena broke the black wax seal. The invitation named Cole Group's Rescue Gala for the following evening, where its anonymous investor would be formally announced before employees, lenders, and the financial press. Her chief operating officer remained across from her, one hand resting on a tablet. "The credit review is complete," he said. "The company can survive, but not under the plan Vanessa submitted." Elena turned to the workforce schedule beneath the invitation. 9,000 names have been reduced to departmental totals, health benefit costs, and severance projections. Vanessa's proposal would protect the Cole estate and senior shareholders by forcing the operating company into bankruptcy. 3 plants would close within 48 hours. Pension obligations would be transferred to litigation. Thousands of employees would arrive for work and find their access cards dead. Near the bottom, Adrian's disclosure had been logged at 9:17 that morning. He had surrendered his position before sending the records that exposed the plan, yet he still did not know who had read them. Elena placed her fingertip beside the plant closures. "Prepare a continuation facility that guarantees payroll for 90 days, she said. "No layoffs while the books are corrected. Freeze all distributions to the family holding company." The chief operating officer made no move toward his tablet. "We can execute that privately through counsel. Not if Vanessa controls the announcement. Then replace her before the gala." Elena looked at the invitation again. Its embossed lettering caught the sunlight, elegant enough to disguise an execution. "A private injunction buys time," he continued. "Your presence changes something else." He rotated the tablet toward her. On the screen waited years of archived headlines, photographs outside her former home, rumors about her relationships, competitors tracking her investments, strangers publishing addresses tied to her family. Vale Meridian's anonymity had protected more than negotiating leverage. It had given Elena control over who entered her life and why. "The moment you walk onto that stage," he said, "your face becomes the fund. Reporters will reopen your marriage. Rivals will challenge every acquisition. Anyone who ever wanted access to your money will know where to look." The room remained cool, but Elena's thumb pressed a crescent into the invitation's thick edge. Exposure carried a price no balance sheet could contain. Once the cameras connected Elena Vale to Vale Meridian, she could never again sit unnoticed at the cafe counter or hear an uncalculated answer to a simple question. Every future kindness would arrive with doubt attached. "And if I stay hidden?" she asked. The chief operating officer touched the workforce schedule. "Counsel may stop the filing, but Vanessa can tell employees the investor demanded the closures. By the time we correct her publicly, panic could empty the plants and destroy supplier credit." Elena rose and crossed to the glass. 43 floors below, people moved through crosswalks in dark coats, each carrying a life invisible from that height. Mortgages, prescriptions, college payments, groceries due by Friday. The Cole family had seen her plain purse and decided poverty made her disposable. She would not permit them to make the same calculation 9,000 times. Behind her, the espresso machine released a soft hiss from the service alcove. The familiar smell of ground beans reached her, and for one brief second she saw the cafe's scratch counter, Adrian tightening a loose hinge beneath her sink, Vanessa's palm suspended beneath the chandelier. Revenge would have been easy. She could reject the rescue, preserve her secret, and watch the Cole name collapse under its own weight. But bankruptcy would reach the loading docks long before it touched the mansion. Elena turned from the window. "Accept the invitation." Her chief operating officer studied her. As Vale Meridian's disclosed owner, Elena signed the gala acknowledgement in a firm black line. "Release the payroll guarantee at 6 tomorrow evening, contingent on my taking the stage." He entered the instruction. A confirmation tone sounded, small and irreversible. "Security will need a new protocol. So will your communications team. Arrange both." Elena lifted the invitation and slipped it into the same plain black purse Vanessa had tried to seize. "And reserve one seat under the name Elena Vale. No title. By nightfall, The gala program had been revised. Vanessa received the guest list first. Elena's name appeared near the bottom, looking poor, ordinary, and alone, while the identity of Vale Meridian's owner remained blank until the stage announcement. Crystal chandeliers poured white light over the ballroom, while a string quartet softened the clink of champagne glasses. The air carried gardenia perfume, chilled wine, and the dry metallic breath of camera equipment. Elena entered through the main doors in the same charcoal dress she had worn at the Cole mansion, her plain black purse resting against her wrist. Conversations thinned as people recognized Adrian's former wife, though no one connected her to the blank space in the gala program. Vanessa reached her before she had crossed half the marble floor. Emerald silk whispered around her ankles. The Cole family ring gleamed on a chain at her throat. "You actually came," Vanessa said, glancing at Elena's dress. "I suppose free champagne is difficult to resist." Elena accepted a glass of water from a passing server. Ice clicked against crystal. "I was invited. So were the people financing this company." Vanessa looked toward the raised stage, where a silver lectern stood beneath Cole Group's crest. "Try not to confuse the two." A nearby reporter turned at the edge in her voice. Vanessa noticed the movement and smiled, widening their private confrontation into a public performance. She lifted her champagne flute and tapped one nail against it. The bright ringing note pulled bankers, employees, and cameras toward them. "Some of you may remember Elena," she announced. "Adrian's ex-wife." The quartet faltered into silence. "She appeared at our family gathering this week after years away. When I asked why she had returned, she created such a scene that I had to slap some sense into her." Laughter flickered near the bar, uncertain but audible. Vanessa savored it. "Now she's followed us here, still dressed like the poor ex-wife who cannot stop clinging to a wealthy family." Heat from the camera lights settled across Elena's cheek where Vanessa's hand had landed 2 nights earlier. She did not lower her eyes. Her fingers loosened around the water glass, and she set it on a silver tray before the ice could betray even the smallest tremor. "That isn't what happened." Adrian's voice came from behind the press line. He crossed the ballroom without a tuxedo, wearing the dark suit in which security had escorted him from Cole Group. His former access badge was gone. In one hand, he carried a legal envelope. Vanessa's smile vanished. "You were removed from this event." "From the company," Adrian said, "not from the truth." He stepped beside Elena, but did not reach for her. This time, his action asked nothing of her and offered no private comfort in place of public accountability. He faced the cameras. "Elena did not ask my family for money. She never took $1 in our divorce. Vanessa struck her because our family believed a woman who looked poor could be humiliated without consequence." Shutters snapped. The sound rolled through the ballroom like hard rain. Adrian's throat moved once before he continued. "I allowed that belief to grow during our marriage. I heard the insults, apologized afterward, and called my silence peace. It was cowardice." Elena's gaze shifted to him. No closed car waited outside for another delayed apology. No darkness concealed the cost. Vanessa seized his sleeve. "Stop. You have no idea what you're throwing away." Adrian removed her hand, opened the envelope, and placed a signed document on the lectern. "My inheritance disclaimer," he said, "effective immediately. I surrender every claim to the Cole family trust, the mansion, and any future distribution tied to this company." A murmur spread across the room. Vanessa stared at the signature as if it were a fracture traveling through glass. "You would abandon your own blood for her?" "I'm giving up the money, so you can never say Elena made me speak for it." He turned to Elena, leaving several feet between them. "I should have said this when it could have saved our marriage. I'm saying it now because the truth does not become optional when forgiveness is no longer possible." The ballroom doors closed behind the last arriving reporters. Every camera remained raised. Vanessa had intended to display Elena as a poor woman trespassing among wealth. Instead, Adrian had stripped the Cole name of its moral shield and surrendered the fortune that once purchased his silence. Then the house lights dimmed. A single spotlight found the empty lectern, illuminating Adrian's signed renunciation beside the sealed acquisition file. The chairman approached the microphone and glanced toward the unfilled name on the program. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "the owner of Vale Meridian has arrived." A low electronic chime sounded, and the ballroom screens changed from the Cole crest to two words, Vale Meridian. Blue-white light washed over the lectern. The scent of gardenias mingled with warm camera cables as reporters raised their lenses. From the side entrance, the unnamed chief operating officer stepped forward, the same man who had driven the plain gray sedan away from the Cole mansion. "Vale Meridian was founded 12 years ago," he said, "and now manages assets valued in the billions. Its owner has declined every public introduction until tonight." Vanessa searched beyond him for someone important enough to match the numbers. Her gaze passed over Elena without stopping. Then the chief operating officer turned toward the woman in the charcoal dress. "Ms. Elena Vale, the stage is yours." Chairs scraped backward in a single rolling wave. Bankers rose first, followed by attorneys, employees, and finally the stunned members of the Cole family. Applause broke beneath the chandeliers, sharp and gathering, while Elena crossed the marble floor carrying the same plain black purse Vanessa had tried to seize. Adrian did not move to escort her. He stood beside his signed renunciation and watched her claim the room by herself. Vanessa remained seated for 3 seconds longer than everyone else. The family ring at her throat trembled against the emerald silk. "That's impossible," she said, but the microphones caught it. Elena climbed the steps. The chairman vacated the lectern and offered her the sealed acquisition file with both hands. She placed her palm on its smooth cover, then waited until the applause faded into the low hum of ventilation. "At 6 o'clock this evening, Vale Meridian funded Cole Group's payroll guarantee," she said. 9,000 employees will be paid. Their health benefits will continue, and no plant will close during the 90-day restructuring period. Relief moved through the employees in broken breaths and clasped hands. Elena opened the file. That funding was possible because Vale Meridian acquired the controlling interest in Cole Group's secured debt this afternoon. A legal diagram appeared behind her. Loan facilities, collateral, voting rights. One line connected every obligation to Vale Meridian. "Effective now, my company controls the debt that determines whether Cole Group survives." Vanessa stood at last. Her chair struck the floor behind her. "You concealed a conflict of interest. You were married into this family." Elena turned one page. "I disclosed my former marriage to independent counsel. I recused myself from pricing. The acquisition was approved at market terms after your board circulated false financial statements." The screen changed again. Bank transfers replaced the loan diagram. Dates, authorization numbers, and payments routed from the employee pension reserve into a private entity controlled by Vanessa. The room lost its breath. Even the cameras seemed quieter. "These records were included in the documents Adrian released," Elena said. "Vale Meridian's forensic auditors verified them against bank confirmations. Over 3 years, $14 million was removed from protected employee funds and disguised as consulting expenses." Vanessa gripped the edge of table. "Those transfers were authorized corporate distributions, not by the pension trustees." Elena lifted a second folder, its paper edges bright beneath the spotlight. "This contains the signed transfer orders, the receiving account records, and the altered board minutes. Copies have been preserved by outside counsel." Adrian stared at his sister, but he did not intervene. His choice had opened the records. Elena's choice had turned them into consequence. Vanessa pointed toward the exits. "Security, remove her." No one moved. The head of security looked instead to the chairman, who removed his Cole Group pin and lowered his eyes. Elena closed the evidence folder. The click of its clasp carried across the ballroom. 2 nights earlier, Vanessa's raised hand had defined who held power inside the family dining room. Now every loan, every protected job, and every remaining piece of the Cole estate depended on the woman she had called poor. As controlling creditor, Elena said, "Vale Meridian is suspending all authority held by Vanessa Cole, effective immediately." Vanessa's hand rose to the ring at her throat. The room stood around her, silent and unmoved. Elena placed the evidence beside Adrian's renunciation, then looked directly at her former sister-in-law. The company has until 9 tomorrow morning to accept independent control and full restitution of the missing funds. Her voice never sharpened. If it refuses, these records go to federal authorities, and Cole Group enters bankruptcy without protection for the family trust. The ballroom clock advanced by 1 minute. For the first time that evening, Vanessa had no one left to order. By 8:59, the cold boardroom smelled of stale coffee, wet wool, and toner from the documents stacked beneath white fluorescent light. Rain ticked against the 40-story windows. Elena sat at one end of the table with her plain black purse beside her. Adrian stood near the glass, no title attached to his name, while Vanessa faced them with the family ring still hanging at her throat. The digital clock changed to 9 o'clock. Vanessa's attorney pushed a signed resolution across the table. Independent control was accepted. The family trust would return the missing $14 million, and Vanessa consented to cooperate with the authorities. Her voting rights, executive position, and access to Cole Group were permanently revoked. Elena read the signatures, then handed the document to outside counsel. "Release payroll," she said. Her chief operating officer entered the command on his tablet. 9,000 direct deposits moved from pending to funded. Plant managers received instructions to keep every gate open. Pension accounts were restored before the first morning shift punched in. Vanessa touched the ring at her throat. "You have everything now," she said. "The company, the evidence, the room." Her voice scraped against the last word. "Was humiliating me worth pretending to be one of us?" Elena closed the folder. "I never pretended to be one of you. You hid billions from Adrian. I hid them from people who measured love by access." Adrian turned from the window. His reflection crossed Elena's in the dark glass, close but separate. "She owed me the truth," he said, "but I made our marriage too unsafe for it. Every time my family reduced her to what she appeared to own, I asked her to endure it quietly." He looked at Vanessa. The slap did not create this ending. Years of permission did. Vanessa unclasped the chain and set the ring on the table. This time, no one offered it to Elena. Outside counsel escorted Vanessa toward the door. Her heels clicked across the stone, then faded into the elevator corridor. She left without authority, without control of the family money, and without the silence that had once protected her. The federal referral proceeded with her cooperation. Elena had not purchased revenge, and wealth would not purchase Vanessa's escape from accountability. Adrian waited until the door closed. "What happens to Cole Group?" "Vale Meridian will restructure it," Elena said. "The family will lose control. The employees will not lose their livelihoods. And me." The rain had softened to a silver hiss against the windows. Elena lifted her purse and walked to him, stopping beyond arm's reach. "There is no position waiting for you, no inheritance to restore, and no marriage to return to." Adrian nodded once. His empty hands remained at his sides. "I understand. Do you?" Elena's voice stayed quiet. "You spoke when it cost you everything. That matters. It does not erase the years when speaking would have cost less." His gaze dropped to the pale circle on her finger. "Then I won't ask you to erase them." 3 months later, morning light warmed the scratched wooden counter of a neighborhood cafe. The espresso machine hissed. Cinnamon and roasted beans filled the narrow room. Elena sat by the window in a navy coat, reading a restructuring report that confirmed every coal plant remained open. No cameras waited outside. She had learned to live with recognition, but she no longer organized her life around hiding from it. The bell above the door rang. Adrian entered carrying no flowers, legal papers, or promises. He had taken a job with an employee-owned manufacturing firm across town, far from the Cole name. He ordered 2 coffees, paid with his own card, and stopped beside her table. "May I sit?" Elena studied him over the rim of her cup. This was not the man who had once asked her to shrink so his family could remain comfortable, nor was she the woman waiting for him to defend her. Nothing between them was owed. That made the answer hers. She pulled out the opposite chair. "For coffee," she said. Adrian sat without reaching across the table. Sunlight touched the empty space between their hands, warm and unclaimed. Elena had saved the workers, surrendered her anonymity, and refused both cruelty and reconciliation as forms of obligation. She had not won Adrian back. She had won the freedom to decide whether he could meet her again. And this time, Elena did not need to hide her fortune or diminish herself to discover whether love could recognize her.